Last week, we talked about how David brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord back to Jerusalem, and how he danced before the Lord with all his might as he brought the Ark that contained the presence of the Lord to the city of Jerusalem, where David also lives. And then David has built a big palace for himself, and then he feels convicted that the ark still lives in a tent, in the tabernacle, which was the tent that they moved through the wilderness with. And so the tabernacle still contains the Ark of the Covenant. And so David wants to build a temple to the Lord. And the Lord says, no, you're a man of war, but your son is going to be able to do it. And not only is he going to be able to build a temple to my name, but also his descendants will always be on the throne. And that descendant is Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And that is who fulfilled that prophecy that the Lord gave to David. After that, after David returns to his palace, and he has the Ark of the Covenant there in Jerusalem with him, he remembers a promise that he made to his dear friend Jonathan, that he would take care of Jonathan's family. And so David asked one of his servants, is there anyone in the family of Jonathan still alive? And so in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1, David asked, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? And so we're going to let David tell you a little bit more about that story from his perspective, and then I'll come back and talk to you at the end.
Have you ever had a best friend? Not just someone that you spend time with, but someone you really love, someone you trust. All our lives, we were so close. He died in the battle. Well, after I became king, I asked one of my servants, I said, are there any alive from Jonathan's family? And it turns out there was one man, Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's son. He lived quite far away. And I asked my servant to bring Mephibosheth to me. And when Mephibosheth came into my presence, now something you have to know about him is he was lame in both of his feet. He couldn't walk. His feet were both crippled from an early age. Actually, it was when his nanny helped him escape death when all of the king's sons were being killed. And when someone is lame in both of their feet, they're not able to do very many things. He certainly would never have been able to become king. He would not have been able to be a general or really do much of anything. He needed to have food brought to him. He needed to be carried from place to place. When he came into my presence, he looked afraid. He bowed low. I told him, Mephibosheth, because of my love for your father, Jonathan, I want you to sit at my table. I don't mean I just wanted him to have one meal with me, to have dinner with me. It was, I want you to be invited to my table for any meal for all time, because you, Mephibosheth, are in my family. I consider you like my own son. And for the rest of the time I was in Jerusalem, Mephibosheth sat at my table. And even after I was exiled and I was running, and I came back to Jerusalem as king, Mephibosheth still sat at my table with me, the king. Even though Mephibosheth did not do anything himself to deserve it, it was because of my love for Jonathan, my best friend, my closest friend. My God certainly showed his kindness toward me when I was just a boy. I was a shepherd. I was the smallest of all my brothers, and when Samuel came to anoint the king, my father showed him my brothers, and when Samuel got to all of my brothers, and they're strong men, he said, "Do you have another?" And they brought me the smallest of my brothers, the youngest, and Samuel anointed me king. The Lord directed Samuel to anoint me king. I showed Mephibosheth the kindness of God that Jonathan had showed me. I know the kindness of the Lord. I can tell you so many stories throughout my life where God showed me kindness when I did not deserve it. The least I could do for my friend Jonathan is to show the kindness of the Lord to another.
David meets with Mephibosheth, and he calls for him to come to him, and Mephibosheth is scared. At that time, when a king died, then the person who was going to take over would a lot of times kill everybody who was a descendant of the king who was just living. And so Saul and his son Jonathan were both killed in battle. And so a nurse or a nanny was taking care of Jonathan's son at the time, whose name was Mephibosheth, and she hears that Saul and Jonathan are both dead, and so she is scared for Mephibosheth and his life, and so she scoops him up and runs, and he's 5 years old at the time, and as she's running, she falls, or he falls, and he becomes crippled in both of his feet. And so David, when he asked one of his servants, "Is there anyone in the house of Saul that I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake?" They say, "Yes, Jonathan's son Mephibosheth is alive." And so David says, "Bring him in." And so Mephibosheth comes in, and he is nervous, and we can kind of tell that because when he comes in, he bows down to pay him honor, and David says, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. And David says in verse 7 of chapter 9 of 2 Samuel, "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" A dead dog. Mephibosheth sees that he is of no earthly value to the king. His grandfather tried to kill the man who is now king, like Saul tried to kill David. And then David brings him in, and what does he expect? Maybe he expects that David's going to kill him, or make him a servant, or something. But David says, "Come in. I want you to eat at my table." Mephibosheth says, "Why would you do this to a dead dog like me? I don't deserve it." You guys, we are Mephibosheth in this story. Our Father, the King, invites us to his table. Do we deserve it? Is there anything that we can do to earn our salvation? No. We don't deserve it. We don't deserve to be called a child of God. We don't deserve to be in the family of the King. And he says, "Come. Come and sit with me at my table and eat with me." And eating at the king's table was like being one of his sons or one of his children. And so the Lord invites us to his table, invites us to be his children, not because of anything we've done. We're dead dogs. Not because of anything that we've done, but because he loves us so, so much, and he wants us to be part of his family. How amazing is that? How life-changing. Think about it. If you're Mephibosheth, you're a lame man. Both of his feet were hurt, so he couldn't walk. You're a lame man. You don't have any way to produce anything or work anyway. And the king says, you, come here. Sit at my table. Eat my food. Be part of my family. We have no way to repay the King of Kings for the kindness he's shown us. But he still says, come, sit at my table, eat my food, and be part of my family. You are loved by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He wants you to be his child. He wants you to sit at the table with him. He wants to enjoy communion with you. So this week, remember that you are invited to the Lord's table. Remember that he loves you so much. And part of our response to his love and his invitation is joyful obedience to do what he asks us to do. He loves us and he wants us to be part of his family. And that is good news.